we recording? Testing. Okay, great. Testing. I'm gonna start recording here. iPad, and I'm gonna face this towards. Let me turn this off so you don't. Go. Do that. Yep. I'm gonna start recording on my phone as well.
Sounds good. You're set with 2 backup devices.
Redundancy is a key thing.
Yeah, it's an emergency. It's important.
And now we're recording on the phone.
Okay.
Great. Hi, so I'm Amarakvati Murphy Ly. It is June 10th, 2024. I am with Dr. Saro, and we are in City Hall in downtown Long Beach, and we're going to get started on this interview.
Yeah. Hi. Hi, Murphy.
Hi. Hi, Dr. Saro. Do you prefer Dr. Saro, or do you, is there a...
Either way,
Okay.
It's fine. It's what you're comfortable with and what you prefer.
I'm going to keep going for Dr.
Okay,
Saro.
that sounds
Yeah.
good.
All right, so first questions are like, where were you born?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you grow up, and where do you call home now?
Yeah.
How long have you been at the place you call home now?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand in 1980. So I resettled in America. We arrived in San Diego in 1982. So from 0 to pretty much birth to 2, we moved around from one camp to the next to resettle in America. So we lived in San Diego for maybe about 3 years before we then moved to downtown Los Angeles area called Echo Park, because it was the closest place to the garment industry in downtown, and it was a place where a lot of people got piecemeal work to work there. And so my family heard about it because they had friends that lived in the area. So I grew up in Echo Park and had moved around throughout my life until I went to college. So I, went to Igorok High School. So have been living in what I call armpits of LA. So lived in Glasso Park, and then, an area between Lincoln Heights and Silver Lake. So we moved around a lot because it was about cost of living of home. We think it's expensive now. It was, not as much, not as, I guess, expensive now, but it was still an issue back then when you needed to find a place to live and settle down. So and then, I went away to college, but I decided to resettled in Long Beach when I got married and was looking to set roots. So we bought a home here in Long Beach, my husband and I, in 2011. So we've been here since, and this is what I call home.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. So you moved the garment district. Were there any? Did your family have like? Was there a strong Cambodian community working in the garment district at that time?
There was a lot of Cambodian refugees, and I remember a lot of my neighbors were Central American refugees, so El Salvadorian, a lot of Guatemalan. So many of them grew up, resettled in the Echo Park area. Some of them were my neighbors. Yeah.
Was there a strong Cambodian community in these pockets of
Yeah.
LA? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And it's because it was where the work is, and my parents didn't want to move to Long Beach. I think at that time, there was a high rate of violence in the 80s, and that was, even there was high violence in LA, Echo Park area, it wasn't as bad as Long Beach in their mind. So we stayed there. It didn't prevent my oldest brother from joining a gang, and similar stories to the challenges of refugee resettling in really high crime and poor communities. So.
Okay. Has any of that, what from your, I want to ask about what from like you growing up has influenced like your politics?
Yeah.
Like,
obviously it has.
It just sounds like that experience is motivating.
Yeah, it's in my bio. It's really the, actually that was what drove me into doing labor organizing, was the experience. Not only did my parents work at the garment factories, I went a lot of family and neighbor. I grew up, as any immigrant refugee household, you grew up in the environment helping out as much as you can, and obviously feeling the impact of trauma from war, as well as trying to resettle in a country where you don't speak the language and you don't understand the culture. So I struggle in school without any assistance, trying to figure out and how to navigate, knowing that I had to actually be the navigator for my parents, being at a young age because of the English ability I had compared to them, right? So very much the immigrant refugee experience, and where you had to figure out systems and process early on. And in these environments, we've seen young people who either succumb to the environment or you break through. And I made a decision early on, even very consciously, that I wanted to break through. I didn't want to live in this condition. And I learned by being in school the disparity that exists between honors students and regular basic students who just were given, classes to take with no one advocating, right? So I talked to so I learned early on, well, how did they get there? I talked to them. I tried to figure out, they're like, oh, we got in because we took a test. I was like, well, I'm going to see if I can get in without taking a test. So I advocated for myself at 11 years old to be placed in these honor classes, right? And I share this example because it's just what I learned over time, and how do you advocate, and not only for yourself, but then later on your community when they don't get what they need in order to survive. And so that became part of a process to get to college, right? There's no career counselor telling me, oh, you're so smart, Suely, you should go to this school, right? There was nothing. So for me, it was making sure that not only I did that for myself, but whoever needed it as I got older, in that I had a privilege being one of the few that would survive, right, with my family to come to the U.S., so the United States. And from that, I learned to be politicized after college. When I went on something called the Immigrant Workers Freedom Ride, I had friends in college that, one in particular whose family is from Seattle with a background in organizing, and learned about this a little bit through them. But until I went on that ride, I realized, wow, there's a whole world out there I didn't even know and exist to be able to change things for a community like mine. So that was the really catalyst for me to see that not only was it a passion, but I also could be good at this. And this is not something they share with you when you're growing up in the career path you can be. It's not like today where there's so much exposure and education about speaking up and advocacy and role modeling, right? So that's how it led me to becoming a labor organizer, running a nonprofit called My Girls in Action here in Long Beach, working in an advocacy organization to ensure things were translated and culturally appropriate for the API community, and then working for a state senator. Meanwhile, getting my degree, my master's, and then my doctorate. So I was one of those people who never just did one thing because I needed to figure out how to get all this done, because I was in a hurry to get things done, basically. I needed to start making an impact, and I needed to make money at the same time. It's like, I can't, if I want to do all of this, I have to work really hard, right? So obviously that set up my work ethics and my ability to just juggle, right? Which why it's all framing, right? Like earlier I shared with you, I don't like to use the word crazy or hectic. I try to keep it in perspective, right? It is a lot, but I'd rather do this than anything else, right?
A full life, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I wish I had iterated this before, but if you ever want to take a break in the middle of our interview, please feel free to let me know, and I'll pause it and I'll stop it, and so you were politicized after. I'm sorry, what was the
after college?
After college, but you learned, you were like you learned, or you were motivated, or you were like in when you were like 11, you knew what you wanted, like you wanted to help people, you wanted to stand.
Well, I knew that I had to, in order to get what I needed in order to have better classes and better education. I knew I had to ask for myself. I wasn't going to wait for anyone to get me to in these classes or wait for somebody to tell me you're gifted, you need to take a test, right? So it's a self-agency and self-empowerment all at once at a young age.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time to be. Yeah, no, that's cool. So you grew up. All right. So you moved to Long Beach in 2011.
11, yeah.
Did you? And then you. How long? And you ran in 20. I'm sorry. When did you?
2019, I guess.
2019.
The election was in 2020, but you start your campaign before that. So I actually started a year out. So I really started in 2019. You know, I think I share with you my career path, and it's a lot of grassroots to grass top work. It wasn't predetermined. It was really just driven by passion of the work, and then also just interest in what I like to say, building like a garage of tools that I can use in order to create meaningful and impactful changes, right? Not just an individual, but community. And in order to do that, you need a variety of tools just as an organizer. If you want to inspire and empower people to change their situation by going on strike or taking action, you need to be able to build trust. You need to also share tools and technical stuff. So there's an art and a science, I believe, in creating social change, and I feel like you get involved. I got involved in these different settings because they're all part of how we make our society and ultimately democracy better, right?
Yeah. In 2011. So you were here in 2011. What was Long Beach like? How did you feel about Long Beach in 2011, and what made you decide to run?
Yeah. So I was here in. I went to Seattle, Washington after I graduated from college in 2002, and then I was in Seattle, but I came back to the LA area back in 2006 to become the executive director of My Girls in Action. So I was working here before I lived here.
Oh, okay.
And I grew up coming to Long Beach because I had relatives here. We just didn't want to, my parents just didn't want to live here. But I grew up coming here on a regular basis. So, I've seen it change over time as a young girl to an adult. And it's changed significantly from my memory in that it was a big refugee community and everyone galvanized to be here because that was where all of the restaurants, the supermarket, and people lived that were family members. But over time, people move away because of various economic opportunities, housing opportunities. So the community has become more dispersed in the city and throughout the region than before. And I think that obviously where I represent Cambodia Town area, there's still a concentration, and that's still what historically is known where most of the Cambodian community live and did business, which is why the designation. But with that change over time, it's because the generations change too. When you leave, you don't want to come back to Central Long Beach because of its, challenges around safety that people have felt, and also just housing option and, honestly, business options too, right? So people feel their social mobility if they leave the central area. And I think that for me, I've always thought about it as, well, some people don't have a choice to leave. And even if they did, why do they need to leave an area where we should make better, right? I saw this as a community leader in running a nonprofit with young people. It's about how we make changes of where we live, not to leave, right? And that's just how I view things growing up is like, you can't just leave the problem. We have to fix it because it's never going to go away, right? And that's kind of the process I took in looking at how to decide to run. It's a lot of factor around understanding the community, understanding the political environment, having organizing skills to run a campaign, the ability to fundraise, I was ready at that point. Obviously nervous and uncomfortable because it's not something I ever did, and to decide to run against an incumbent wasn't an easy decision. It was a decision I made with my husband and to some extent, my family, because it was going to take a toll on all of us because I had children who needed to, you know, for me, people to help me look after, right? So it's a ultimate. It was a decision, ultimately a decision I made with my family because it's a commitment of the trajectory of my passion and work to really make changes, right, at these different scale. And so that's kind of why I decided to run, and I ran a grassroots campaign because that's all I know. And being a labor organizer is reaching out for that support because that was the environment I came from. So, working and building relationship, fundraising to be able to run a campaign where I really built community to come together, and got elected as the first Cambodian American in March of 2020. And then a few weeks later, the pandemic occurred. And I'm so glad that I won in the primary without the pandemic because it really set me on a pathway to build a momentum, even virtually, to win the general election too.
I see. Can I ask you to go into more detail about the campaigning process?
Yeah. So, the campaigning process is a lot about building connections and relationship for people to believe in you and actually invest in you when they make a donation. It was really a challenge being a woman, an Asian woman, a Cambodian woman, running because I was already, number one, a challenge running for office in general for people to believe that you could win. Two, and that you could win against an incumbent who's been in office for almost 12 years. So it was a process of knowing that there was an opportunity for change, and that was really what I worked off from, because people have felt that there hasn't been change and that there hasn't been improvement, and that I was going to be the person who is going to work hard, earn trust, bring in people involved in the process to make these changes. That is what I ran on. It was a positive, new vision, new leadership campaign, and I worked at it, and that's why I started early and fundraised small dollars. I had $5 donated from our elderly, yai in the temples to the maximum of 400 at that time. And I didn't take any of it granted because that is their $5 that they would have donated to the temple or bought grocery with, right? Because that's a symbol of their faith that they believe in you. And I built on that momentum of trust and working with our leaders of what we could do together. Now, not everybody liked me, not everybody agreed that I should have been the one to run in the Cambodian community, but for me it was really, well, if it's an election, so if you really feel you want to run, then you should, right? I'm doing it. The only permission I needed was from my husband and my parents. Otherwise, I didn't feel like I need any permission from anyone to run, right? And it's really up to you to build a campaign where you can win. And that's what I did. It was people by people, and then people helping me. So it was an organizing grassroots campaign, brought in a lot of people who never voted, registering our elders who never voted, was interested in before, because nobody ever really took the time to reach out to them, right? So it was those kind of effort. During the election, we had elders from our temple driving the people to the voting place, right? Like true grassroots effort where it was, oh, I need a ride. Oh, can you then pick up this other person? It was like this constant phone tree all the time, and it was so beautiful.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know the yays were donating.
Yeah, they were helping me. They helped donate potlucks to me when we were doing potlucks. They were all instrumental.
Well, tell me about your campaigning team. Who were?
Yeah.
who's like your campaign manager?
So I didn't specifically have a campaign manager, but I had a campaign team of, a lot of it were Cambodian leaders, and I had a campaign field coordinator, but I really managed my own campaign, and had obviously hired a consultant and a fundraiser to help me. When you're at a council level, you don't have a lot of money, so you spend it where you need to, and a lot of it went to mailers. A lot of campaigning goes into the flyer you see in your mailbox, right, before election. So a lot of it was volunteer time, donations of food and others for volunteers. So that was the makeup of the team, and we met regularly. I met with different team leaders who would help me, who wanted change in their neighborhood.
Can you tell me like exactly their names and like who they are?
Well, I prefer not to, because if I mention one, I might forget others,
Okay,
and I don't want to leave anyone out.
Okay, no worries.
But I think that if we had to dive in deeper another time, but it's not that I don't want to name names, but I'm afraid that I'll leave somebody out.
Yeah, understood. No worries. Cool. Well, who were your biggest mentors and allies before you started in politics and then after? And yeah, or now that you're in politics, I guess. Yeah.
I think that there are a variety of people you seek advice from for certain things. I wouldn't say I have one mentor that is a go-to for everything. So I seek the advice of our local electeds, who are my colleagues, because they have that experience, to our state representative, who are, our leaders in the state level as well as the federal level. So it's really checking in about their thoughts and perspective, because it's about alignment around decisions that are made at their level and what they could do to assist us in the local city level, whether it's funding, whether it's policy that, or legislation that they're thinking about or we're thinking about, just so they are staying in coordination around what it means, and is it a good thing, or what are the unintended consequences. So when you're in this role, I think it's very important you communicate with everyone and get their feedback and ideas. But if it was to talk about a specific mentor I go to, now I don't have that, but I go to my husband for some ideas. I talk to him a lot about, bounce things off of him about certain things, because he's understands the Cambodian community. Or I'll go, the mayor, Rex Richardson, because he has a breath of the city. I'll go to Senator Lena Gonzalez and Samuel Lowenthal, Josh Lowenthal, right, for state perspective, and then Congressmember Robert Garcia for federal perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So there are variety. I talk to a lot of people.
Your colleagues are your allies. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, even they're all my allies. I wouldn't. I think that it doesn't really help if you. At the end of the day, as much as we may not agree, I always try to make sure there's a communication channel with people. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, did you have any big influences before you started in politics? I don't know, maybe a teacher or something. Yeah.
I have to say that I don't. And that's kind of sad. I wish I could have this beautiful mentor story, but it's really not the case in my situation. I do hear people share that, and I'm like, man, how do I find a Miss so-and-so? But, that's what, and maybe I just didn't look for it, because as I share with you, as an 11-year-old, I never waited to be told, oh, you should apply for this, or you should, you're so smart, you should go to honor class. I just do what I think I want to do, and I just go for it. And don't usually, maybe I just don't open, I don't ask, I don't know. But it's always been, for me, I know what I want, and I know what I can do, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was just trying to get a clear picture of what motivates, all of you.
I mean, for me, I'm just always driven by people I talk to on a regular basis. The person who works at the grocery store, to, writers, Like I was just reading Yoyai Kusuma, her biography. She's a Japanese artist. Like, what inspired her to become an artist, and how did she get to the point in her life? So now I'm reading her bio, and it's because she took the risk to try to figure out how to get to the U.S. So I think for me, I'm always looking for a variety of hearing people's experience, because sometimes you forget where you're at. You need another perspective about to being grateful, or to know, oh, this is not, it's not that different from other people's experience. I think growing up as a Cambodian refugee, I didn't grow up seeing that many Asian people on TV. So it wasn't easy to think, oh, that's who I'm going to aspire to be. Like, I mean, if you saw any Asian person, it was like Bruce Lee. Obviously, I watched this movie growing up. All of these Asian, kung fu movie, and these, Coming to America,
Yeah.
all of these 80,
Yep.
right? So you don't really, and then around you, I didn't see any, women, Asian women, and this day, I still don't see that many. So since it wasn't available, I looked at, inspiration all around. So that's kind of where, inspiration, but motivation is always about this. I just think this deep burning fire for justice, right? When you've grown up in an environment of injustice, and I told you I'm not that kind of person who runs away from problem. I want to solve it, and we have a lot of deep-rooted problems that needs to be solved beyond, honestly, sometimes organizing or advocacy. We have to change the law, right, in order to make change, and that takes working with people to do that, even on a local or at a state level, right? So that's what motivates, inspires me, is how do we constantly solve a lot of these social inequities, right? Especially in my district that has the highest amount of violence and poverty.
Okay. Cool, thank you. How are you feeling?
I'm good. I can keep going because I actually, want to make sure we,
Oh, yeah.
get to answering your questions
Awesome.
and everything.
Thank you. Let me just go through them. You have to check them off as I go. How do you, all right, let's see here. All right. What was your life like before taking office compared to your life now?
I would just say that
Let me also, and then how has that affected your personal philosophy?
Well, I've definitely never been invited to so many things than I am now. Before, obviously, not that many people want me to be at their events or come to certain meetings, but within an elected role, you're invited to represent your residents and obviously speak on issues. So obviously, my schedules change when people invite you to things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that I have, I feel that I am every day fulfilling, this purpose to be able to create that change and social positive change, even on a micro level. Some days are where it feels that you're stepping backwards, right, when things aren't moving forward with projects or funding is being cut and you can't continue certain services that we usually provide as a city. But in the whole scheme of things, I feel that within just the last 3 years, I'm not even done with my first term, we've made major improvements, as much as some people feel that maybe in differing opinion, but overall I can say we've made major investment in our infrastructure, right? Like we just did a groundbreaking on MacArthur Park to redo the whole park. There's a master plan that involved the community. It was community driven in their feedback, and city staff working in ensuring it's designed to reflect what the community wants in the park. We've done a master plan for MLK Park to do similarly with what's done at MacArthur, because we want to get feedback from the community. There'll be a plan and we need to fundraise for it. Then we're going to redo Anaheim Corridor. We just had an affordable housing open with the children's clinic underneath it on Anaheim. So we have, and then we're preparing to do a Cambodia Town Gateway on Anaheim. And we're looking into doing a African American Long Beach Black cultural historic district right now as a so there's a feasibility plan, right? And thinking about how we're preparing for Olympics, I feel that people are more connected than they ever have, maybe more than before. I do know and have a feeling the Cambodian community is more unified than it was when I started, through the efforts I made to making sure that we work all together, right? So I think that it's definitely helped me fulfill a purpose, and I think that's how my life is different from before, is I feel like I was finding a place to make an impact, and I feel like I found it through this. This isn't an end all, obviously, as a council member, but it's definitely what I feel I was striving to do, and didn't realize running for office was what I was meant to do, right? Or being an elected.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. How do you how are communities of color and other minorities represented in Long Beach?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we've had a more diverse council. Obviously, we had our first Black mayor. So I think if we're talking about elected representative, it's represented through electeds. I mean, we have more women on council than we ever before, gender-wise. Obviously, just like Barack Obama being elected president doesn't solve all the challenges that's come with, history of community colors, right? I think that it's at least demonstrated that we can have representation to be able to represent our community and have dialogue and think about ensuring there's access to all parts of our community that ranges from our LGBTQ to our ability community to our Cambodian and other API community and our Black and Latino community and so many of our other faith community. Some of the things I've done a lot is to make sure to lift up our Buddhist community, who is very present here but always has been invisible. As a Buddhist, I do want to make sure that they're lifted in their representation in the city too. We have, over 12 temples in Long Beach, and bringing them together every year for Visat Day and other cultural activity is really crucial for me. So I think that because we are diverse, we represent segments of a community, and if we don't, we want to make sure we lift them up as well. So I think that it's never enough or it's never complete, but that's why it's an ongoing process to make sure that we're reaching out and having dialogue with people and businesses and everybody as much as we can.
Okay. Let's see.
No worries. I want to make sure you answer all your questions.
Yeah, thank you. Have you with your time in office and your experiences, how do you think you've changed, or how have you been as sorry, give me a second. Has your time in office changed or motivated you in a way that you didn't expect? Or things that you've learned that you just go, oh, I didn't know that was a thing or anything like that.
Every day, Murphy. I mean, I think that's because we can't predict the environment that we are in, right? Whether it's, the biological to the political and the environment that we're in, changes a lot about, what we encounter and how do we address it. So it's definitely being, I think, open and always, I think I always thought I was a pretty patient an open person, but I think you have to be even, I have to be even more intentional to really just listen and assess things, because we also are at a local level hear from people right in the community when it happens, right? Emergencies to events, and we are hearing it raw, and sometimes there is no distinction on fact and subjective perception of what happened, and a lot of it is here to listen, because our role initially isn't always to make judgment or solve the problem. It's just they want to be heard, right? Residents, businesses, people, because that is the role that I've taken on. In order to represent people, you have to listen to them, right, and hear what's going on. But also coming back when there's less emotion involved, because sometimes that affects about, what is it that in the end of the day that will either make you feel better or would solve the problem, right? So it's not always a direct science around 1 + 1 = 2. It's a lot about, okay, where are they at? What's going on? What's the environment? What's the situation? What is happening in our department that's changing this, or part of it? Is it a city, city property even, right? So we have to ask a lot of questions as well after listening. So that's more of what I've just learned to do more and more, is to be even more just listening and asking questions. And sometimes it's being reminded that you can't make a decision always right away, even though it's a very fast-paced, highly charged environment at times, because it obviously involves policy. It affects taxpayers' funds when you make these decisions. So it's just really a lot of consideration that I've never had to before, because I was just an individual, right? Yeah. So obviously it's changed me in that way, and yes, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, you answered my question so well and fast.
Oh,
and I blocked out an hour, and you've just.
I've answered them all, and did I stump you in asking
You
more
didn't
questions?
stump me.
Okay,
I can't be stumped.
I see that. I saw that, and you're like, I need some follow-up questions. Here, let me share some with you then. I think that one of the things that's important for me to share is right now I am, I think, the only Asian elected official in the city of Long Beach, right?
Yeah.
Even and so in a city with over 60,000 Asian Pacific Islander, having one representation is important, but it also just doesn't mean that we shouldn't have them at the board level, school board level, or these other levels. So I'm hoping that if it's not for Cambodians, other Southeast Asian and other Asian and Pacific Islanders to inspire Nora to be in public service or run for office. I think that people know it's challenging and oftentimes not something your parents want you to do. I think it's two things that a lot of parents don't really want you to do. It's either arts or politics. Arts because they don't pay enough, politics because they feel it's too dangerous, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think that it's about being able to have that voice, to be able to hear from communities that I think hasn't always been represented, which is why it's great that we have such diverse people on our council. But it's also, I see it as a responsibility to make sure that I share my experience in that I didn't come equipped with money or resources or even support, right? With everything you do, whether it's running for office or becoming a doctor, you have to build kind of your own self-agency and, support system and other resources to get where you want to go. And so, and it makes a big difference when we have more who can represent community to speak up on unique needs that people don't often know about or need to be reminded of, right? How we are Asian Pacific Islanders made up of a bunch of countries, different language and history, and mental health needs, right? So.
Okay. Understood. So, I'm trying not to ask leading questions. How do you feel exactly about Asian representation then in Long Beach?
Well, I think it's not enough, obviously,
Okay, yeah.
and I think that there needs to be diverse because, as much as I represent Asian community, I also represent the Cambodian specific community. So I think that there needs to be more, in general, just visibility of anything around leadership, whether it's in city or in some of our businesses either. So I think that we don't have that as much as in city of LA, right, or even some parts of Orange County. There isn't a strong kind of general Asian Pacific Islander presence, leadership presence. And I think that, and that's what I'm hoping we can do is I can support that and lift that up in any way I can in partnership with others. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Is there? Oh man, this is a question I really want to ask. How do you think how has the Cambodian community in Long Beach been since you've been elected? Like how's that community been since 2020, I guess, before then?
Yeah. Well, divided. I think that we've seen every time there's a New Year parade, there's a protest, and there's division around the opinions of various things. And while it's fine to do so, I think it's not been healthy in a way where it's really kept people from working together. And I think that it's changed over time because I've been very intentional about working with our elders and to some level our younger generation too, right? And figuring out how do we create more spaces to come together and opportunities for doing cultural events. So I want to say that as much as it's just hard when, in general, working with community and getting everyone to be aligned in a goal, it's just been a challenge because of the history with the Cambodian community, with the trauma and the war, and how people have figured out how to resettle. And so I think that over time, even in just 3 years, people who normally don't work together are, and people who weren't cordial with each other are. So it's changed a lot. I think that the thing is making sure that we connect better, better with the younger generation. I think it's hard because the elders dominate in the space and how they want things to be. And I think having made some changes in the way that we can work together with the elders, hopefully will change how we can work with the younger generation.
Okay. Is there anything within the community that you're working on right now that you want to talk about?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are trying to build a Cambodian American Cultural Center. So I brought forward an item maybe about 2 years ago to do a feasibility or a vision plan for it, and we completed it. And so we're trying to form a nonprofit right now and get programming going, and then and also build a nonprofit, and then showcase the programming work in what we have now as Sangkran, which is New Year celebration for Southeast Asian, in April, in coordination with the Cambodia Town Parade and Festival, right? And it worked out really well this past year, and I think that for me it was making sure we're inclusive of not just, in Cambodia we don't call it Cambodian New Year, we just call it New Year. But because we're in Long Beach, we want to make sure people know which community is celebrating it. We call it Cambodian New Year. And, others call it Laos New Year, others call it Thai New Year. And I'm like, well, it's just Sangkran, which is, what was celebrated when it was one empire. It's Sanskrit. So, and it's what my Buddhist venerables advise is that's the best way to bring everyone, not naming it based on ethnicity, but its celebration itself as a way to bring people together, right? So so that's kind of what we're working on, and I'm hoping that this will help us better bring more people involved wanting to do cultural language and historical arts. So it's ongoing, and it's exciting to be able to look for resources so we can do something sustainable for, because cultural and art preservation is so important given what happened with the genocide, with artists being murdered and arts being lost.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're totally right. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it's very important, which is why thank you for having me do these interviews. I'm not always the best at documenting my work, so I'm glad you have something that maybe my kids can and grandkids can look back at and say, hey, because to my children who've grown up in this, they don't know anything different. I was door knocking with my 2-year-old daughter, carrying her, and my son's like, 5, 6, helping a door knock, and now they know, oh, who's the mayor, who's the senator, and I mean, these are terms they hear on a regular basis, but I didn't know what these were growing up. They know that they have privileges being able to get invited to events because of my role, but I'm quick to remind them that they also have a role to do well in school, to serve as well. So I don't do this in isolation in the sense that, oh, this is something I do with the community. It's really ingrained in my immediate family's value and what we do, and so that they understand that they're part of the generation to make sure that they carry it on too in some way, right? If a 7 and 11-year-old can kind of, to most extent, understand what that means, but they see a lot and they hear a lot about this work and being in this environment. If you were to ask them what they love about your mom being in council, they're like the free food for sure. That's the only reason why they want to come with me to events.
How old are your children?
7-Eleven, like the mini mart. Yeah, my daughter's 7, and my son is 11 right now. So, yes, it's there. And my daughter loves being in parades right now. My son doesn't like. He's kind of an introvert. So they're like, oh, where are you going this weekend, Mom? They're like, can I come? And I'm like, I don't know. You want to go to a parade? My son's like, no. Are we going to go to the temple? No. Yeah. Well, we're going to go to dinner. Oh, and then they fight over it. I know, it's funny, isn't it? So I do love that aspect, that they have this perspective that their schoolmates don't, but also know that it's a unique perspective, it's a privileged perspective too that they're able to have.
I'm glad that it seems like, yeah, like you said, that they recognize it.
If they don't, I make sure they do. And their dad too.
Well,
yeah.
I think
yeah, I actually need to get on a call in a little bit at 3. Well, so
I think we're done then. I guess we can stop recording. It's June 10th in City Hall. This is Amarakvati Murphy Ly with Dr. Saro, and bye.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'm sure we could have talked more, but
no, I get it.
I think hopefully this is helpful.